Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today is the 4th of March 2020, and today I am going to talk to you about the recent developments about peace in Afghanistan. As we all know, that on the 29th of February 2020, a landmark peace deal was signed between the representative of the US government, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, and the representative of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, who are recognized by the US only as Taliban, their representative Mullah Abdul Ghani Brother. Mullah Abdul Ghani Brother had been in Pakistan's captivity for 6 long years, and he was released to facilitate the talks with the US government. Khalilzad is an ethnic Afghan, but he's a US citizen, and he has held high positions in the US State Department. He has also been one-time ambassador of the United States to Afghanistan. So with the signing of this deal, history has come full circle. We know that the events that unleashed the invasion of the US forces in Afghanistan began with the events of 9/11. The US had blamed the Taliban for hosting the Al-Qaeda, who were then blamed for whatever happened on the mainland of United States of America. The Americans invaded Afghanistan with the mission to eliminate the Al-Qaeda and also to break the Taliban. But over the next 18 to 19 years, they couldn't do that. They sent in forces, their own forces, as well as their allies, but they were unable to defeat the Taliban. And the Taliban were resilient. They continued to fight the Americans despite the heavy bombardment, the use of drones, the use of depleted uranium ammunition. They continued to fight on, and despite the fact that many people thought that they would not be able to survive the onslaught of modern technology, they withstood their ground. And a time came when the United States was forced to talk to them directly. The Taliban wanted direct talks. They did not want to go through the Afghan government, the government in Kabul, which they thought was a puppet, a stooge of the US. And they were finally able to prevail upon the Americans. The direct talks were held. And in the entire process, Pakistan played a leading role of a facilitator. So this provisional peace agreement portends a change in the area, a change which I hope will be for the better. So the comprehensive peace agreement, which was signed in Doha, had 4 parts. One was the guarantees and enforcement mechanisms that will prevent the use of the soil of Afghanistan by any group or individual against the security of the United States and its allies. So this is a major guarantee that the Americans want from the Taliban. They do not want the Afghan soil to be used against them or their allies. The second guarantee is the enforcement mechanism and announcement of a timeline for the withdrawal of all foreign forces from Afghanistan. And after the guarantees have been announced, there will be an intra-Afghan dialogue, which will hopefully start from the 10th of March on the Common Era calendar. And the fourth important point is that a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire will be an item on the agenda of the intra-Afghan talks. So first of all, a ceasefire, and then creating a situation of normality where peace returns to Afghanistan, and simultaneously there will be a political process in which all stakeholders will talk to each other. All Afghan parties will talk to each other to decide on the future roadmap for Afghanistan. So part 1, as it is stated in the agreement, which was signed in English, Dari and Pashto. It says that the United States is committed to withdraw from Afghanistan all military forces of the United States, its allies and coalition partners, including all non-diplomatic civilian personnel, private security contractors, trainers, advisors, and supporting services personnel within 14 months following announcement of this agreement, and will take the following measures in this regard. A, the United States, its allies, and the coalition will take the following measures in the first 135 days. They will reduce the number of US forces in Afghanistan to 8,600 and proportionally bring reduction in the number of its allies and its coalition forces. The United States and its allies and the coalition will withdraw all their forces from the 5 military bases that they have in Afghanistan. So first part is about the withdrawal of the American forces and that of their allies. So it is, the first step is 14 months reduction of forces, 8,600, and subsequently complete withdrawal of the forces within 14 months. B, with the commitment and action on the obligations of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known as the Taliban to them. Part 2 of this agreement, within the Part 2 of this agreement, the United States, its allies, and the coalition will execute the following. The United States, its allies, and the coalition will complete withdrawal of all remaining forces from Afghanistan within the remaining 9.5 months. The United States, its allies, and the coalition will withdraw all their forces from the remaining bases. So it's a complete time frame of how the withdrawal will take place. Para C of Part 1. The United States is committed to start immediately to work with all relevant sides on a plan to expeditiously release combat and political prisoners as a confidence-building measure with the coordination and approval of all relevant sides. Up to 5,000 prisoners of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which they insist is not recognized by them as a state, and up to 1,000 prisoners of the other side will be released by March 10, 2020, so in approximately a week's time. And this is subject to some controversy, to which I'll come later. The first day of intra-Afghan negotiations, which corresponds to Rajab the 15th, 1441 in the Hijri calendar, the relevant sides have the goal of releasing all the remaining prisoners over the course of subsequent 3 months. The United States commits to completing this goal. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan commits that its released prisoners will be committed to the responsibilities mentioned in this agreement so that they will not pose a threat to the security of the United States and its allies. I want to bring here one point that the peace deal was preceded by 1 week of reduction in violence, that the Taliban stopped or reduced their attacks on the extra regional forces in Afghanistan during this time, which led to the signing of this protocol. And Para D of Part 1 states, with the start of intra-Afghan negotiations, the United States will initiate an administrative review of the current US sanctions and the rewards list against members of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which they recognize only as the Taliban, with the goal of removing these sanctions by August 27, 2020. So they will remove all sanctions against them by August of this year. And the Para E of Part 1 says that with the start of the intra-Afghan negotiations, scheduled so far for the 10th of March, the United States will start diplomatic engagement with other members of the United Nations Security Council and Afghanistan to remove members of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan from the sanctions list, with the aim of achieving this objective by May 29, 2020. So about 2 months' time, 2 to 3 months' time, which corresponds to Shawwal the 6th. Para F states that the United States and its allies will refrain from the threat or the use of force against territorial integrity of political independence of Afghanistan or intervening in its domestic affairs. So on its part, the US promises not to intervene in their internal affairs and not undertake any initiative whereby Afghanistan will be fractured or perhaps divided along ethnic lines. Part 2 states that in conjunction with the announcement of this agreement, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known to them as the Taliban, will take the following steps to prevent any group or individual, including Al-Qaeda, from using the soil of Afghanistan to threaten the security of the United States and its allies. So for the Americans, this is of primary importance, that the Taliban, once they become the leaders or perhaps part of the political dispensation of Afghanistan, to not allow Al-Qaeda to use their territory. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan will not allow any of its members, other individuals or groups, including Al-Qaeda, to use their soil to threaten the security of the United States and its allies. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan will send a clear message that those who pose a threat to the security of the United States and its allies will have no place in Afghanistan, and will instruct their members not to cooperate with groups or individuals who threaten the security of the United States and their allies. Continues to say that the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan will prevent any group or individual in Afghanistan from threatening the security of the United States. This will include them preventing recruitment, training, fundraising, hosting of those who may attack the United States. The Taliban will also commit themselves not to deal with those seeking asylum or residence in Afghanistan according to international migration law and the commitment of this agreement, so that such persons do not pose a threat to the United States. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan will not provide visas, passports, travel permits, or other legal documents to those who pose a threat to the security of the United States. So all in all, what they are saying is that the Taliban will not be host to non-state actors like the Al-Qaeda or other groups, perhaps the ISIS, who threaten the safety and security of the United States of America and its allies. Part 3 states that the United States will request the recognition and endorsement of the United Nations Security Council for this agreement. The United States and the Taliban seek positive relations with each other and expect that the relations between them in the post-settlement era will be determined by the intra-Afghan dialogue and negotiations in a positive manner. The United States will seek economic cooperation for reconstruction with the new post-settlement of Afghan Islamic government as determined by the intra-Afghan dialogue, and will not interfere in their internal affairs. So what the agreement says is that the United States will positively help the new Afghan government, whichever shape or color it might have based on the intra-Afghan dialogue, with its reconstruction and rehabilitation. But the first bump in this post-signing period has been the statement by the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani that he will not release the 5,000 prisoners. He says that the United States has no authority to commit to the Taliban that this release of prisoners will take place. Although in my opinion, the United States had all the rights to do that, because the government in Kabul has been propped up by the United States of America. But this is one of the spanners that Ashraf Ghani, who has been recently declared the winner of the elections, which was held last year in September, has done. So there have been consequences of it, although let me add that the position of Ashraf Ghani himself is very weak. His primary opponent, Abdullah, who was formerly the chief executive in his unity government, has refused to accept this, the results of the elections. He says that the elections were rigged, and he has vowed to establish a parallel government of his own. So Ashraf Ghani's own position is not very secure at the moment, but this is what he has proclaimed. And there have been consequences of this proclamation. There have been attacks by the Taliban against Afghan forces, dozens of them, and they say that they are not bound to not attack the Afghan forces. The commitment that they've given in the peace deal has been only not to attack the United States or their allies, and they say they're not doing that. And they say that the reduction in violence agreement was only for 1 week to allow the agreement to be signed. So they have resorted to attacking the Afghans. And the latest development in this regard is that President Trump spoke to Mullah Abdul Ghani brother by telephone for 35 minutes yesterday, and transcript has been released of those talks, and Trump himself has declared that the talks have been very good. This is his usual style. He says the talks have been very good. So what I understand is that perhaps some via media will be found for getting the prisoners released. Independent analysts are of the view that once the Afghan prisoners are released, Ashraf Ghani will lose all leverage that he might have of having his ways with the Taliban. But the Taliban want the release of the prisoners for the commencement of the talks, intra-Afghan talks, which are scheduled to be held in Oslo, outside Afghanistan, on neutral territory. So hopefully things will resolve slowly and steadily. There might be some hiccups along the way, but this is peace in Afghanistan is good for many reasons. Pakistan has suffered a great deal due to war in Afghanistan. Pakistan has hosted millions of Afghan refugees. At their height, there were about 5 million Afghan refugees. Recently, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was here in Pakistan. He visited our center as well, and before that he met the Afghan refugees also, in which the Afghan refugees actually thanked Pakistan for hosting them for such a long time. Afghan refugees have been here ever since the Soviet tanks rolled into Afghanistan in 1979, even earlier than that. And even now there are 2 to 3 million, some registered and some unregistered, Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So this has been a great burden on Pakistan in many ways. Pakistan has been victim of terrorism and poor law and order situation that has direct connections with the situation in Afghanistan. Pakistan economy has weakened as a result of wars in Afghanistan. Our industry has suffered. Our tourism, although it's picking up now, has also suffered. Pakistan's policymakers, in my opinion, must now make a comprehensive Afghan policy to cater for a long-term positive relationship with its Western neighbors. So that is all that I have to say about the latest situation in Afghanistan. So stay tuned. I will come up with more updates as we see, hopefully, peace returning to Afghanistan, and peace by extension, peace returning to Pakistan as well. So thank you for your attention. Until next time, it's Khuda Hafiz from my side.